All right, so for the Bills Super Bowl party here, I'm going to bring chips, salsa, spinach dip, and rye bread. And you will bring the pizza and the wings.
And my axe. Twa, ha, ha, ha. I pronounce the Sir Dead.
Hello, friendos. This is Chain, welcoming you back to Chain of Commander. Kaldheim is almost upon us, which means we are going to have a plethora of excellent new snow cool god cards that we get to play with. However, I figured with the set now essentially being entirely spoiled, I could go back and do something similar to what I did with Zendikar Rising and actually really highlight some of the unsung heroes of Magic, some of the new and cool commons to be coming out of this set. Now, a list like this will obviously be subjective, so if there's any commons that I mentioned that you're not a fan of, or if there are ones that you are a fan of that I don't bring up, don't worry, just put them in the comments below and let me hear it. I love to hear what everybody else is excited for from this set. That said, let's get into this list here, starting at number 5. At number 5, we have Raiders Carve. Raiders Carve is a 3-mana artifact vehicle that's a 4/4 when it's turned on. Whenever Raiders Carve attacks, look at the top card of your library. If it is a land card, you can put it on the battlefield tapped, and it has a crew cost of 3. In EDH, ramp is king, and some colors they just can't ramp like some of the other ones do. So if you're in a mono, like let's say a mono white deck where ramp is really hard to come by, colorless cards like this that can really slot in anywhere become super useful, repeatable ramp sources. Similar to Explorer's Scope from Zendikar, this card can give you potentially a land every time it attacks. However, like Explorer's Scope, you don't need to reveal that card if it's not a land, so you get to keep some information hidden. But unlike Explorer's Scope, you no longer have to put another creature of yours into harm's way, and can also help you get around summoning sickness because you can crew a vehicle with a creature that is summoning sick. Now, my only major gripe with this card as it is that I do think the crew cost is a little bit high. I personally would have preferred a crew cost of 2, even if that meant sacrificing a power and toughness off this vehicle, because I think that would be a little bit easier to kind of curve your way through the beginning of the game. That said, it's definitely worth trying out in decks that have limited access to other sources of ramp, and is definitely getting a thumbs up from me as far as nice, repeatable, accessible ramp for some of the less rampy colors. At number 4, we have Carfell Harbinger. As I just mentioned, ramp is king in EDH, and blue is one of those colors that has a hard time ramping on its own. Carfell Harbinger is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 creature zombie wizard with tap. Add blue mana to your mana pool. Use that mana only to foretell a spell or to cast an instant or sorcery. Mana dorks that produce strictly blue mana are incredibly few and far between. In fact, the only one I can even think of right now is Silvermere. So having another blue dork that can produce actual blue mana is huge. Now, it does have that restriction that can only be used to foretell a card or cast an instant or sorcery. Well, casting instants and sorceries is pretty much what mono blue decks want to do, so that particular restriction might not even come into play most of the time when you're using this card. And foretell, it's really early since foretell was just introduced, but foretell seems like the type of mechanic that could get really popular in EDH. And if that is indeed the case, cards like Carfell Harbinger only get better from there, and that is something I can really like. And while we're talking about liking things, how are you liking the video so far? I know we're only 2 cards in, but if you're enjoying what I'm saying, definitely consider hitting that like button below. I'd love to see it because, you know, I like it. That said, let's move on to number 3. For our number 3 card, I want to take a step back and go back to my previous comments video for Zendikar Rising. Back in that video, I declared that Feed the Swarm would be the epitome of excellent black removal to come out of that set. Well, for this set, we're going to feed something else. We are going to feed the Serpent. Feed the Serpent is 2 black for an instant, exile target creature or planeswalker. This thing is essentially a downshifted rare. Vraska's Contempt from the Ixalan block did the same exact thing, but also gains you 2 life. But in the grand scheme of things, in EDH, the 2 life is borderline inconsequential. This is common black removal that has none of the drawbacks normally associated with common black removal. It doesn't just destroy, it exiles. It's not a sorcery, it's an instant. It doesn't hit just creatures, it hits planeswalkers too. This is an incredibly versatile and powerful removal spell, and I am sure black decks are going to love having access to a card like this for super cheap, as well as being a functional duplicate of a card they might already be playing in Vraska's Contempt. At number 2, we have Starheim Coarser. Starheim Coarser is 2 and a white for a 2/2 creature Pegasus with flying, and artifacts and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Cost reduction is really good, and the more spells you can cast off of a cost reducer a turn, the more mana it represents. Normally, up until this point, cards that made our enchantments cheaper have tend to be reserved for the rare slot. Things like Starfield Mystic or Herald of the Pantheon were both rares that reduced the cost of our enchantments. This does that at the common slot. This also doesn't just reduce enchantments, this reduces artifacts as well. While we have seen that ability at the common slot before, this is the first time we even seen both of them combined into one card. And because it does affect artifacts as well, decks like Cheerio, Elsha of the Infinite decks, they can use this to slot it in to become another cost reducer to help with their cheap artifacts just being cast off the top of the deck. Any Voltron deck would love to see this, whether they are enchantments, whether they are equipments, whether they are both. This card is white and it can help out all 3 to represent multiple mana over the course of the turns. This is sure to get a lot of use out of a lot of different decks, and I am excited to see it. And you know what you can get a lot of use out of? Subscribing to this channel. I do whole sorts of stuff EDH related, whether it just be top 10 lists, top 5 lists, deck techs, or just general chit chat on the Commander format. I am sure that I will have something that will interest you and help you out in your EDH adventure. So hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you folks join us going forward. All that said, we have one last card, maybe cards, left from our commons to talk about. For our number 1 card, well, when we found out Snow was going to be in Kaldheim, I was a bit excited because I thought that meant that we were going to get the 5 enemy paired tap lands to finish the cycle that was first introduced back in Cold Snap. But boy, was I wrong. Instead, we got all 10 pairings of dual Snow tap lands. Dual as in they have both basic land types as their land types. This is absolutely bonkers because this changes how mana bases can be built on a budget going forward. We have never had dual land types, fetchable dual land types at a slot below rare. And now they are common. They are actually occupying the land slot of packs, meaning that these things should be absolutely everywhere. Ramp that looks to find specific card types, things like Wood Elves or Knight of the White Orchid, now have access to these to be super budget, targetable ways to fix along with their ramping. They are absolutely crazy. I don't know if these are good or bad quite yet for the rest of the constructed formats, but in EDH, where having access to fetchable duels on the super duper cheap can only improve a deck, these things are huge. And they continue to reassert my particular assertion that Into the North is essentially the best 2-mana ramp spell in all of Magic. No longer can it only hit 5 friendly pairings, well, with a couple of utility lands and basics. These now, into the north, can get you pretty much anything you need. And that is just crazy. So, now at this point, I definitely want to hear from you folks. Now that you know my whole list, I want to know what your list is in the comments below. Beyond that, thank you for joining me today. And I want to give one more shout out here. I want to give a shout out to my Patreons, whose names you should be seeing on the screen at this time. Without their support, I wouldn't be doing this. So if you want to help out the channel, consider stopping in, signing up, being a Changwin. Every dollar can help. And even if you can't afford to be a Patreon, a simple like, a simple thumbs up, a simple share can go a long way for this channel. So thank you very much for joining me today. I'll see you guys again in the future.